What is going on, guys? Welcome back to a brand new video, and hopefully you guys are having a great day and also had a great festive and New Year season, as I haven't really made too many videos in the latter stages of December or at the beginning of this year. So just wanted to let you guys know that hopefully you had a great Christmas and New Year, and hopefully 2020 is treating you guys well so far. And today I have got volume review for volumes 19 and 20 of My Hero Academia. Just a couple of things I wanted to touch on before getting into the review itself is firstly, I wanted to praise the anime, season 4 of the anime, because that has been pretty damn good, and kind of everything that you look for when translating something over from manga to an anime in terms of like the quality of the animation and obviously the music, stuff that you don't get from the manga, was done really well in the anime. So I just wanted to praise it for that, and season 4 has been really good. And I also wanted to say that the last volume review of this has got almost like 2k views, which is the most views I've got on my channel so far. So I just wanted to say thank you for checking out that video. I assume the reason it's kind of got more views than my regular video is because the anime kind of lined up kind of quite well with the time of the volume review, so kind of loads of people went back and checked it out, because obviously the overall fight happened the same couple around that time in the anime, so people wanted to kind of see the volume counterpart and how well the manga did in comparison to the anime and whatnot, or vice versa. So yeah, so just thank you for checking that out, and that's pretty much everything that I wanted to say. The last thing is, obviously I did say after the last volume review that I was going to go back to single volumes, but I actually kind of prefer the format for this series in particular of doing dual volume reviews, so I think that I'm just going to continue doing it in that way, with the exception of the next couple of volumes, which I'll talk about more towards the end after I review the volumes. But yeah, so that all that exposition kind of done and out of the way, let's get straight into the reviews of the volumes. Now obviously first I like to kind of dissect the covers and look at them quickly and just usually praise them, and I kind of got to do the same again for volumes 19 and 20. I kind of just like the look of this volume. It suits the arc perfectly, and I really like the cover, Jiro being kind of like the main focus of it, with a couple of other relevant characters in the background all dancing, and like I said, it's pretty relevant to the arc and suits it quite well. And I just like the nice pink that was used. Hasn't really been used in any cover up until this day. We got a couple of reds and a couple of purples, but I don't know, I think the pink stands out quite well amongst the rest of the volumes, and it's like a lighter colour other than white, probably the lightest colour that's been used on any volume so far, and it just kind of stands out, and like I said, it suits the nicer laid back tone of the arc quite well. And then this volume is probably the second or third best, or my personal favourite, of the My Hero Academia covers. It looks like a movie poster. I know that Horikoshi is a big fan of Star Wars, so maybe he got some inspiration or was trying to pay homage to that series through this cover, because it does look like a very Star Wars or movie-esque poster kind of thing, and it just looks really cool. Deku using his brand new gauntlets that he got within it, and all the characters kind of relevant in the arc being on the cover, and obviously you've got that nice lighter blue on the left hand side, signifying, I don't know, good, and obviously red being on the villain side. So yeah, really cool covers there. And today I'm going to be talking about chapters 172, I believe, through 188, or 168, sorry, through 188. And just quickly before I get into the review itself, I just wanted to talk about the art quickly, and just kind of the way that Horikoshi has split up his arcs and stuff. And I think that the pacing of the series is kind of something that's overlooked, and he isn't praised enough for the way that the series is paced, because I think it's really good. I heard a couple of people kind of criticizing this arc, especially anime watchers who aren't really enjoying the slower pace of the arc. But for me personally, I'm a big fan of the way that Horikoshi does his kind of arcs. Obviously, you go from a really high stakes arc like the Overhaul arc, which is also incredibly long and the longest arc of the series, to a couple of arcs kind of like this one, and then the Endeavour arc, and then the 1A versus 1B arc, which are only like a volume and a half each in terms of length. It's just you go from obviously, like I said, something really high stakes and something with a lot on the line in the overall arc, to something which is a bit more laid back and a bit more kind of eased up in terms of this arc. But what that allows you or gives you, I guess, is kind of getting more character progression and development in a bit more of a laid back environment. So obviously them, all they're doing is kind of setting up for a festival and just enjoying themselves, and you get to kind of see how the characters are in that kind of environment, because you and it's kind of like the first time that we've seen characters from 1A in quite a while, considering the overall arc was quite long and only 4 characters from 1A were actually featured within it. So it's just kind of nice to get up to date and see the characters first just in a natural environment without them fighting, and then obviously in the 1A versus 1B arc you get to see how they've progressed with their quirks. So I think this arc, although it is quite laid back and a bit slower paced than the regular My Hero arc, is done really well. And like I said, the pacing of the next couple arcs is really nice, and it does go from like a kind of a laid back arc here to a more high stakes arc focusing on the number 1 hero endeavour, and then again to kind of an arc with less stakes with the 1A versus 1B arc. But every arc that happens kind of still has an important and central like focus to it that is relevant to the overall plot of the narrative. And I heard some people kind of calling this arc filler, which I wouldn't really consider it, because this arc is largely focused on kind of integrating Eri back into the story as a character, as opposed to just leaving her behind in the overall arc after having rescued her. They keep her kind of relevant and as an existing character within the world of My Hero through this arc, as well as showing a bit of progression in Deku's quirk. So this arc is definitely relevant and important to the overall plot. So yeah, I wouldn't really consider it filler like most people or some people are calling it. And me personally, I'm a big fan of the arc, but again, I can kind of understand why people may not enjoy it as much as most other arcs in the series. In terms of the volume itself, there isn't really too much particularly to talk about, because obviously the arc is kind of slower and a bit more laid back. There isn't really a large amount of stuff to talk about, so I'll just quickly run kind of through volume 19 here first. The first chapter in this volume kind of focuses on the Aoyama stuff that volume 18 left off with. I kind of predicted it had something to do with the UA traitor plot, but it appears as though Aoyama just wanted to be friends with Deku, as he knows that he also struggles to control his quirk. And that's all that it appears to be in this chapter. But me personally, I still don't trust Aoyama as a character. I still think there's a bit more that he's kind of hiding from 1A and from all the characters. So I don't think that the Aoyama plot is completely over. I feel like it would just be a weird couple of chapters to throw in with no relevancy to the rest of the overall narrative. So I still think that there'll be more to explore with that Aoyama storyline, but as for this volume in particular, that's all that it kind of is focused on in terms of Aoyama. So yeah, that's the kind of end of that little tiny Aoyama couple of chapters, and then you get into the festival where 1A and 1B are both putting on performances for the other classes in UA, and I just like this couple of laid back chapters where they focus on what they're going to do. You get a couple of funny moments like with Mineta and stuff, and just overall getting to see the 1A characters after a while in a nice kind of laid back environment, like I was saying. So yeah, and the standout character of this arc is definitely Jiro. Obviously she's slightly shy at the beginning of the arc, but definitely comes into her own by the end of it, and she's a really enjoyable character to see progress through this arc, and how she directs kind of the whole performance, because she is like the best character in terms of knowledge about music. And I also like Eri's character in this arc and how she's integrated back into the story. Obviously she's still a child, and you kind of get that sense that she is still tied down by Overhaul, and the whole point of this performance and Deku asking for Eri to go and see it is because he wants her to feel safe. Obviously with Overhaul being captured and whatnot, he wants her to feel like she can finally let go of everything that's happened, and that's the entire point of making this performance as good as it needs to be. And I also like the role that Mirio kind of takes after losing his quirk. Obviously not being able to attend UA without a quirk, he kind of looks after Eri and becomes more of like a mentor figure for her, and kind of continues to fulfill his role even after saving her. So that's really nice, and I like the character of Mirio even after losing his quirk. But other than that, nothing else really stands out in this volume, other than maybe this little Bakugo storyline and him not really wanting to take part because other people kind of see 1A as a negative bit of UA, and they kind of blame them for everything that's kind of happened to UA as a school. But what I like is this slight character progression for Bakugo. I don't think that Volume 1 or Volume 2 Bakugo would ever have taken part or even considered the idea of playing the drums in the band, just because it wasn't the kind of character that he was. But obviously through the progression that he's gone through in the license exams and whatnot, I feel like it's kind of a nice time for Bakugo to try and integrate himself back into the class, still being like an angry guy though, and not having changed his character too much. He I don't know, takes a nice place in this arc as well. And then you've got the progression of Deku's quirk. He kind of learns how to use ranged attacks with All for One. No, One for All, sorry. He learns to use ranged attacks. And that's kind of done through the progress that he's made so far with the quirk. And that's pretty cool. Obviously All Might kind of running him through how to do that, and then he learns how All Might wasn't using 100% of his power the entire time that he was using it. So a couple of like little revelations here and there, and a nice upgrade in Deku's quirk, which coincides with the gloves that he gets made by Hatsume. Hatsume kind of being now his kind of support character that helps him in terms of making equipment for him and whatnot, and I hope that Hatsume remains that kind of character, because she'll basically be like his version of David Shield. So that'll be pretty cool to have. So yeah, that is kind of all that happens in this volume, other than what I'm going to bring up now being the villains. Now personally for me, I think these villains are the weakest villains so far in the My Hero Academia series, but they do fulfill their role in the arc pretty well. I feel like they are just kind of there for the Deku fight and just to fill up some gaps. Because for me personally, I think that this arc would have been perfectly fine without a villain, and that Gentle Criminal and La Brava aren't really necessary in this arc. But their involvement in the fight probably is what kind of saves them from being not entirely good villains to pretty good ones. But yeah, like I said, I think they're the weakest part of this arc, and also the weakest villains in the My Hero Academia storyline so far. However, I'd be incredibly surprised if Horikoshi doesn't use them again later in the series in some sort of redemption storyline, because as you kind of learn in this arc, they're not incredibly evil and devious people like other villains in the arc in the series. So yeah, I don't really like them too much as villains. They're okay, but like I said, the weakest part of the story. But where they really do shine is probably in arguably the best fight in the entire series. Maybe not in terms of the emotion that it invokes, but just the way that it is drawn and how the quirks kind of bounce off each other and whatnot, just works really well. So personally, I think that this is probably my favourite fight in terms of the way it's drawn in the series. But the villains themselves, not fantastic. So yeah, that's kind of volume 19. Like I said, not really an exorbitant amount to talk about, because not really too much happens. You get a nice little amount of progression for characters like Jiro, Bakugo, and just a few other characters in 1A. But overall, nothing too spectacular kind of happens until you get to volume 20, which is like the resolution of the arc. So like I was saying, the arc isn't incredibly long, and I think that's what kind of saves it. If the arc was any longer, I can kind of understand that people would show a little bit more hate for it, because it's not the most interesting storyline to hit the series. But like I said, I think it's necessary and it's relevant, so that's kind of what saves it. And also the fact that it isn't incredibly long just makes it a nice little short breath of fresh air for the series, and just a little bit more relaxing time basically. So yeah, now we'll get into the review for volume 20. So yeah, volume 20 kind of concludes, like I said, this festival arc and the fight between Deku and Gentle Criminal. And one thing that I do kind of want to praise the villains on is how their relationship is built more on love. You know, like the rest of the villains in the series kind of have this hate and this intent to kill, whereas these two villains are kind of their bond and their, even though they have villainous intent, it's all built on the love that they have for each other, and that like is kind of put together in La Brava's quirk, which gives Gentle like a massive boost in power. So yeah, like I said, that's one thing that I can praise these villains on, and they are quite unique in terms of the rest of the villains of the series. And Gentle Criminal looks pretty badass in his state of love, I guess, and it definitely drives Deku to his max, basically. And I kind of like the way that Deku's kind of using everything that he's learned so far together in this fight. He's obviously got the new range attacks, which he utilizes quite a bit within the fight, but obviously he's got shoot style as well. So I don't know, it's nice to see that Deku's kind of evolving and learning himself. All the abilities that he's kind of brought up to this point, he's still utilizing. It's not like now that he's got this new range attack that everything that he's learned before is kind of made redundant. So that's pretty nice, and overall the arc has quite a nice ending to it, with the performance still going forward and Deku just stopping the performance from being called off because he knows that it's important for Eri to just grow as a character, and like I said, get rid of the shackles that Overhaul kind of has on her. And just a couple of pages that focus on the band, and in particular Jiro singing and stuff, was just really nice to see, and it was a really nice conclusion to the arc. And I just really enjoyed it. And this double page spread here is just fantastic, and it was just nice to see characters grow even in this like kind of shorter arc. And obviously the main whole point of the arc was that Eri kind of lost the shackles Overhaul had in her, and that's kind of symbolised through this image here of her kind of enjoying for the first time in maybe her entire life, enjoying something. So yeah, that's kind of the conclusion of the arc. Personally, I'm a big fan. I really enjoyed the fight, and everything that came before and after was also really fantastic. The build up was nice, and the festival was incredibly fun. And then it kind of starts the next arc. There's a couple of chapters of just kind of exposition and whatnot, and kind of just tying together everything that happens. And again, like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if this was not the last time that we saw these two characters. I feel as though they have some sort of redemption storyline coming up at some point. But yeah, so that's that for the festival arc, and then you kind of get into the first couple of chapters of the Endeavour arc here towards the back end of this volume, which I'll touch on quickly. Don't want to make this video too long. One thing I did like is how the Wild Pussycats are back, as well as Kota. Just kind of further proof that Horikoshi is really like willing to build up his characters and continue to focus on them within the series. Even though this is kind of only a small cameo, it still shows that all characters in the story are still relevant to it, and Horikoshi isn't forgetting about characters that he's built up prior to these events. So like I said, that's pretty nice, and obviously you get a nice little word from All For One as well. It's like, again, furthering the fact that all characters are pretty much relevant to the overall plot. But where it's really interesting is when they reveal the brand new hero rankings, and this is like the proper start to the Endeavour arc, which is another fantastic arc in the overall series. It begins here in volume 20 and it ends off in volume 21, also being another reasonably short arc. But this is also, more importantly, the first appearance of Hawks as a character, who is one of the coolest characters in the entire series, and he was worth waiting 20 volumes for, basically. He's just awesome, and also it's kind of further in progression for the redemption arc of Endeavour. Obviously, a couple of volumes earlier saying that to Shoto that he wants to become a hero that he can be proud of. And that kind of starts here within this Endeavour arc. And I like that there's a nice focus on Endeavour as a number one hero, with people not really feeling as though he can live up and become the symbol of peace that All Might was. And that's kind of nice. It's not like he's number one hero, everyone's kind of on his side, because he's a very different personality to All Might and is a very different character. So it's kind of nice how he also has to come out of his shell and become a different person so that he can fulfill the role of number one hero. And I appreciate that this is kind of all he says, but in his speech he doesn't really say too much. Hawks kind of talks for a while, and that's all that Endeavour really has to say. And that is just how the number one hero who Endeavour wants to become is going to be. A lot more about what he does through his actions as opposed to his words. So yeah, that was a nice build up for the kind of Endeavour arc, and again another really, really nice arc of the series. And the fight between him and the villain, the High-End Nomu, is another fantastic fight. You get kind of a bit of exposition about the plans that Hawks and Endeavour has. They're not really too relevant at this very moment in time or this arc, so I guess that's something that you can read for yourself and find out about. But then stuff gets really interesting with the High-End Nomu attacking and kind of the beginning of their fight, and then the next chapter begins with a little bit of the Todoroki family kind of talking and whatnot, and you actually get the first use of Toya's name, Toya Todoroki, who's heavily believed to be Darby, and you kind of just get a look at the entire family for the first time, talking to the mother as well. So I don't know, it was just pretty nice that this Endeavour arc is focused on him and also his family. And then they look at the TV and they see that Endeavour is fighting, and that's pretty much where this volume leaves off. Just an incredibly good fight between Endeavour and the High-End Nomu, with a couple of brand new moves shown from Endeavour as well. So yeah, that's pretty much how this volume kind of concludes. And obviously Endeavour, it ends with Endeavour getting a massive scar on his eye from the High-End Nomu, and kind of the feelings of every character sinking as they all believe that the number one hero is dead. And you could clearly see that Shoto has a lot of love for his dad, even though he might not show it. He cares immensely about him, and seeing his father go through this is obviously difficult for him. So yeah, and it's especially for me me personally as a reader, it was pretty difficult to see that happen to Endeavour right when he was kind of showing a change in who he wants to become. And obviously before asking those things to All Might about what the symbol of peace means and what it is and how he's going to become something like that, it just shows kind of change in his character, which you don't see for example the first time you see him in the sports festival, and all that. He's definitely become a different character, and that was also really good to see. And Horikoshi kind of just rips that all away from you by basically making you think that he's dead, or at least lost an eye at the bare minimum. So yeah, that was kind of very brief. Well, not brief, it was like 24 minutes long, but just talking about these two volumes and these two arcs. Now, with regards to the next volume review, it will probably be volumes 21, 22, and half of 23, because that's kind of where that 1A versus 1B arc leaves off. And I'm not going to read another volume of My Hero until the entirety of the villains arc is out, which won't be until October this year. So I still wanted to kind of cover the end of the 1A versus 1B arc, and then the next volume review after that will be the second half of volume 23 and 24 and 25. So that is kind of the plan for the next volume review. But in terms of the scores for these ones, probably a 3 out of 5 and a 4 out of 5. So an overall score of 7 out of 10, which isn't bad. Didn't really live up to the end of the overall arc volumes, which I obviously gave a 10 out of 10 to. But still a very, very enjoyable festival arc, and a very nice beginning to the Endeavour arc, which is concluded pretty nicely in the next volume. So yeah, sorry that I rambled on a bit too much about them, more than likely, but just let me know your opinions of the current My Hero Academia events that are happening, and I'm super excited to go and see the My Hero Academia movie tomorrow, which I'll have a video later on this week talking about. So yeah, that is pretty much everything. Hope you have a great day, and peace.